I'm recording now. Welcome. My name is Megan Pistoles. I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator with the SLELO PRISM. I'll be facilitating today's meeting and fielding questions in the chat box. Plus, we will have time for open discussion at the end of the webinar. Thank you for coming today. The work that goes into managing invasive species often focuses on the treatment or removal of invasive plants and animals. But our work goes beyond the total number of acres treated or pounds of invasive plants removed. Our work aims to protect the lands and waters in which we all depend on. Our discussion today will showcase the unique landscapes and ecological communities that make the St. Lawrence Eastern Lake Ontario or SLELO region so special, and the work that SLELO PRISM and our partners do to protect our lands and waters from the impacts of invasive species. I'd like to invite our SLELO PRISM manager, Rob Williams, to share his presentation.
Thank you, Megan, and good afternoon, everyone. So I appreciate the opportunity to share with you a glimpse of the SLELO region today. You know, it's an amazing and often underappreciated area full of unique natural resources. This photo here is of Grenadier Island, one of the many islands in the Thousand Islands region in the St. Lawrence River. And the island itself is almost entirely encumbered in conservation easements. And unfortunately, this magnificent place is almost entirely impacted by pale swallowwort. The SLELO region itself is a diverse area encompassing approximately 7,387 square miles, or 4.7 million acres of surface area, including just over 3 million acres of forested land and just over 1.6 million acres of surface water. We're host to freshwater systems, freshwater rivers, lakes, wetlands. We're host to shoreline dune systems. We're host to shoreline globally rare alvar systems. We're host to grasslands important for migratory birds, forests, fens, and marshlands. So we have a diversity of landforms and habitat types, all of which are important to nature. Connectivity is really important in the region too. And although we directly manage less than 500 acres, our impact extends to over 5.7 million acres. So for example, what we do in the Oswego River helps to protect the Finger Lakes and inland waters by being connected with the Erie Canal. What we do in the core forest of Tug Hill through our 150,000 acre invasive species prevention zone helps to protect the entire 750,000 acre forest. And what we do in the St. Lawrence River and Eastern Lake Ontario helps to protect the entire lake, all due to its connectivity with other systems. And I think it's important that we take this kind of perspective with our work and our collective work across the region and the state. Within the SLELO region specifically, our focus is on priority conservation areas, or what we refer to as PCAs. This allows us to protect the most important land and waterscapes. PCAs are areas that are unique, have ecological or biodiversity importance. They may be host to rare species, or they may offer functionality such as carbon storage. We currently have 24 identified PCAs that include all of the habitat types that I mentioned earlier. And these PCAs are the areas in the region that are deemed most important from an ecological and from a conservation perspective. And so this is a graphic here that depicts the scope and distribution of our work. That includes diverse approaches such as prevention, early detection, rapid and/or strategic responses, including ecological restoration and even system resiliency. So you can see that we work as far north as Messina, New York, and as far south as the Utica, Rome area. We incorporate things like innovation using eDNA and underwater drones. We do rapid response and management work. We even have emerald ash borer traps out on the landscape. Education outreach is very important to our work. We extend a lot of our work through what we call a volunteer surveillance network to help with early detection of tier 1, 2, and 3 species. Ecological restoration and even the use of biological controls has become more of a piece of our work here in the SLELO region. And we also work in our cities too. We have a very strong, robust watercraft and inspection survey program, and we engage volunteers in everything from doing early detection work to water chestnut hand pulls, for example. And so diving a little bit deeper into some of our more specific protection work that we do to protect our lands and waters, SLELO has been implementing conservation, for example, on the core forest of Tug Hill. And over the past few years, we have provided funding and technical support to help restore portions of the Tug Hill from past logging operations. This included invasive species removal and the planting of several thousand native and climate adaptable trees. It's been a collaborative effort between the Nature Conservancy, the SLELO PRISM, the University of Vermont, and even disabled veteran-owned businesses. So this effort is designed to create healthier, more resilient forests in the region. We even work in our cities. Hey, after all, they're part of our landscape too, as our people. We encourage our communities to plant non-invasive, climate adaptable, and invasive species resistant tree species. So we encourage them to practice the right tree in the right place protocol. And you'll see here a photograph of some folks up in the city of Watertown, including our own Robert Smith, our terrestrial coordinator, planting a tree up in the city of Watertown. And then to the right is the community arboretum, also found in the city of Watertown. We support healthy freshwater resources this year alone, and as an aquatic invasive species spread prevention effort, we intercepted aquatic invasive species on just over 1,243 occasions into and out of other New York, Great Lakes, and North American water bodies. And so this was the result of a regional watercraft inspection and survey program implemented through a collaboration with the Department of Environmental Conservation, SLELO PRISM, Nature Conservancy, and the Thousand Islands Land Trust. This type of prevention program helps our freshwater environments to be healthier and more resilient to invasive species impacts, as well as potential climate impacts. We strive to make our PCAs resilient to invasive species through appropriate ecological restoration when needed or after suppression of invasive species occurs. We've completed invasive species suppression work followed by restoration work in places like Tug Hill, the Salmon River, including the Salmon River estuary, Chameau Alvars, and even on island grasslands. And this type of work is accomplished by overseeding with native seed mix, planting tree seedlings, And often we use live staking using resident on-site native plant materials when and where appropriate. And I think it's important that we kind of round off the loop when it comes to doing invasive species suppression followed by restoration. It kind of completes that whole cycle, because as we know, invasive species often, when you do invasive species suppression, it creates or can create a disturbed area, which invasive species love to become established in. So by going in and doing the restoration work, you kind of preempt a potential invasive from becoming established or reestablished in that area. So it's an important piece of our work. We incorporate innovation into our work, such as the use of environmental DNA or eDNA. And new to our efforts this year is an underwater remote operated vehicle, which is not shown here. But things like innovation and eDNA allows us to detect aquatic invasive fish species, for example, at the molecular level, preferably before they become established, giving us time to develop a strategic response. We've also kind of re-energized the use of biological controls in New York, and we've successfully deployed them to help protect our lands naturally. This is a kind of a non-intrusive tool that helps suppress invasive species and maintain native biological diversity. Of course, you can't use these biological controls until they are approved, and the approval process is extensive. And it takes many years, and you have to demonstrate that the biological controls don't impact anything but the target species. So this field season, for example, we released Hypena opulenta, which is a moth that feeds exclusively on swallowwort plants. And we had varying degrees of success at multiple locations. Collaboration is key to our success. We now have 20 partners working together to achieve our objectives and our goals. We've collaborated on over 22 special projects. And these special projects are above and beyond what the core SLELO team implements. So we collaborate with our partners on these projects. We've helped to provide just over $360,000 in project funding that help to extend, again, the capacity to implement good invasive species related conservation work. And of course, education and outreach is important. We continue to offer hundreds of educational and outreach events across the 5-county region, directly engaging thousands of individuals. This year has been a little bit challenging in that most of our events have been virtual, such as today's event, but nevertheless, it does work and we're still able to engage folks. So that's been kind of a glimpse of the work that we do to protect our lands and waters, our unique habitats, and our priority conservation areas. And in closing, I just want to say that protecting our lands and waters and native biological diversity through a changing climate must include a focus on invasive species prevention. Otherwise, our ecosystems and our conservation work could be compromised. And through our PRISM program, the Nature Conservancy, SLELO PRISM, partners, and all of the PRISMs across New York State, including statewide partners, such as Natural Heritage, Department of Environmental Conservation, et cetera. We're all working together to protect our lands and waters, from the impacts of invasive species so that native biological diversity can continue. So again, our priority conservation areas are based on the most important areas in the region within certain ecoregions. And I believe that you'll all hear more about some of these more specific things that we're protecting. within some of these ecoregions next in Steve Young's presentation. So that's a snapshot of what SLELO is doing to protect our lands and waters. I would thank you, and we'll move on to Steve Young's presentation.
Thanks, Rob. All right, so now that we've familiarized you with the SLELO region and our work, I would like to invite Steve Young, the Chief Botanist with the New York Natural Heritage Program. He is going to take a deeper dive into the unique landscapes and ecological rarities and species in our region. Take it away, Steve.
Okay, to see who's able to kind of stay true and stay on course.
We will see it Monday night on.
Steve, we are seeing your slides. I just believe you need to hit start slideshow. And feel free to share your video as well so we can see you.
Steve, we don't hear you, so you might be muted.
Let me see. Just unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we're hearing you and we are seeing your PowerPoint slides. They're just not started in slideshow view.
Okay. For some reason, I can't find my video, so.
Don't worry about it.
That's okay. Okay, here we go.
Oh, now I can see you.
Okay.
Someone is talking or something in the background somewhere. Steve, is there
Okay.
somebody at your house?
No, it's not me.
Okay.
Someone else is not muted.
All right. I don't see.
Anyway.
them.
Thanks everybody for coming today, and thanks for inviting me to speak today on what SLELO is protecting. I thought I'd start out here with a nice slide of prairie smoke from the Alvars. And if you're not familiar with the Heritage Program or what we do, we are a program of 28 people that includes zoologists, botanists, community ecologists, GIS people, database people, and administration. And we gather and provide information and data to facilitate conservation of New York's biodiversity. We are a program of SUNY ESF in Syracuse, and they provide us with those, with the support you see there on the left. But we're housed at the DEC and Parks building in downtown Albany, which those are our main partners, and they provide us with those support that you see on the right. Most of us aren't at the DEC building right now because of COVID. We're at our houses, so we'll get back there eventually, but we do have an office on the 5th floor there. And you can see in the picture on the right, there's Julie Lundgren. She's our parks ecologist, so she's dedicated strictly to parks. And then we do have other programs and funding sources that fund us. For example, the EPA funds Laura Chappelle, the other woman there, to do work on wetlands in the state. And on our website, you can see up there, nynhp.org. You can learn a lot more about us if you go there. And one of the great things about the heritage programs, there are 90 heritage programs in the Western Hemisphere, including all the states, Canadian provinces, and some other countries in the Western Hemisphere. We all have the similar ranking system that we rank rare species with. So you can see we use a ranking system of 1 to 5, 1 being the most rare, critically imperiled, 2 is imperiled, 3 is vulnerable, and then we have secure, apparently secure and secure. So we usually focus on the 1 to 3 ranks, and we have global ranks, so how rare they are on the globe, and state ranks, how rare they are in New York State. And we don't make the global ranks. Those are made by an organization called NatureServe, you see down there at the lower left. And they're an organization which provides support, databases, and information to all the heritage programs. So we have similar procedures throughout the heritage programs. There are also a couple other ranks you see at the bottom there. Historical, which are occurrences that are before 1980 and presumed extirpated in X rank. We think they're gone from New York or the globe. There aren't many GX species or GH species, but we do have a fair amount in the state. So I'll be talking about these ranks as we go along. Now, if we look at the locations of rare plants around New York, you see there are a lot of occurrences. And when we go out to look at these in the field, we're looking at the size of the occurrence, its condition of the plants, with the surrounding landscape, what that looks like, the threats. And I put that in red because that's where SLELO comes in, and reducing the threats from invasive species for these rarities. We also look at the viability and trends over time, how these things are doing over the years. And our priority in the field below that is we're looking at first globally rare species and federally listed species on the federal endangered and threatened list. We want to keep up the S1 and S2 existing records and also historicals. Historicals that we have mapped that are from before 1980, we like to go out and check to see if they're still there. Declining species. We have program-wide projects, which are projects that include zoology, botany, and natural community people at one site. For example, last year we did Junius Ponds, and we've done places like Plum Island out off the coast of Long Island. We'd like to look for new places too. You can see there's a lot of blank space on that map where we don't have yellow dots, and those are places we'd like to go to see if we can discover new rare species. And then we also verified distribution models, computer distribution models that are done to, to show us where to go to look for more rare species. So when we're out in the field, we take data, and on the upper left, you see Madison Bowe. She's our ESF, one of our ESF botany summer interns, and she's entering data into one of our tablets there. And then on the right, I'm taking a photograph of an orchid in the Adirondacks. And so we're getting the data and photographs and specimens to make sure that they're confirmed. On the lower left is an example of some botanists who also help us out. People outside of the Heritage Program also send in data. Steve Daniel, Ann Johnson, who's done the flora of St. Lawrence County, and Dan Spot. I've done a lot of rare plant work in SLELO. And then on the bottom right, you can see Brittany and Robert from SLELO, who this year discovered a new population of twin leaf, Jeffersonia diphylla there, and while they were doing some invasives work. And this turns out to be, this is the northernmost population of twin leaf in the state. So that was a really great discovery. So people outside the Heritage Program are also making discoveries and sending us information. And if you would like to do that too, you can see there's at the bottom a website, nynhp.org/report-rare. And there's a form there that you can use to report rare species, animals or plants. We also have some iNaturalist projects. We have a Rare Plants of New York State iNaturalist project, which you can join. And another one, the Adirondack Orchid Survey, which we started about 4 years ago in the Adirondacks. And we have a good crew of people out looking for orchids. And we do need some more observations in the Southwest Adirondacks into SLELO. So if anybody wants to join that project, you can let me know about that. So we do have a lot of people that are amateur botanists who are sending in data from all over the state. And every year I produce a rare plant status list, which has all of those rankings for the rare plants in it and the counties in which they occur, and also the phenology of when they're blooming and when's the best time to look for them. So this is the rare status list, which will be coming out shortly this month. So keep your eye out for that. You can go to our website and download it. Actually, we'll have a new website in January. So you might want to check that out too in January. We also provide information about individual species on our conservation guides. And for example, here is one about Indian paintbrush from the Alvars. Also occurs down in the lower Hudson area, but especially numerous in the Alvar areas. And you can see on the right there, the contents. There's a summary, has information about conservation, habitat range, identification comments, all those good things about each species, sort of a fact sheet about each species. And you can get to that on that website, guides.nynhp.org. All right, now let's take a look at SLELO. Here's the boundary of SLELO. And you can see it's west of the Adirondacks, north of the Allegheny Plateau, along the lake and St. Lawrence River. And what I'd like to do is sort of talk about the biodiversity from large scale to small scale. And first, I'll talk about the ecoregions of SLELO. And this is an ecoregional map of New York. And you can see SLELO has a number of ecoregions in it. So what is an ecoregion actually? So it's a recurring and geographically distinct assemblage of ecological communities associated with similar environmental and physical conditions. And what are those conditions? So below there's temperature, precipitation, topography, the geology and soils, and also land use. So it's recurring over the landscape. And it depends on what ecological communities are within those ecoregions too. So what are ecological communities? Well, they are a variable assemblage of interacting plant and animal populations that share a common environment. So again, in that precipitation, geology, soils, the plants that are assembled together, plants and animals that are together in those kinds of conditions. And you can learn about the ecological communities of New York State through our publication, the Ecological Communities of New York State. And you can also get that through our website, and that has very detailed descriptions of all the communities. You can also look at individual communities on our online conservation guides, like the plant conservation guide I showed you. Here are the ones for the natural communities. There's also animal guides. And here is one, you can see down at the lower right, we put in red maple as a filter, and you can see all the 5 communities that have red maple dominant in them. The swamps that have red maple associated codominance with other trees. You have red maple black gum, swamp white oak, sweet gum. So some of these are on the coast, and some of these are in SLELO, like red maple hardwood swamps along the shore of Lake Ontario and Oneida Lake. So if you want to learn more also about the ecoregions, you can go to this website by EPA. Just Google level 3 and 4 ecoregions by state. If you click on New York, you'll get to this page where you can actually download GIS data if you have a GIS system. And then you can download a PDF of the map that I showed you before and all the descriptions of all the level 3 and 4 ecoregions. Really a lot of detail there. It's really interesting. So let's look at the level 3 ecoregions, the larger ecoregions that cover the state. And in SLELO, we have the Eastern Lake Ontario lowlands, which extend from Lake Erie all the way over to Lake Champlain. And so the lowlands of SLELO, that ecoregion covers a large part of the prism. And then the other part of the prism is mainly covered by the northeastern highlands, which extend down from the highlands in lower Hudson all the way up to the Adirondacks and the Tug Hill Plateau. So you get some Adirondack ecoregion in there on the eastern part of SLELO, and then the Tug Hill, which is wholly within the prism. And then the Northern Allegheny Plateau, which is mainly central and western New York over to the Catskills. There's a little bit that comes into the southern part of Oneida County. Now let's look at the level 4 ecoregions, which are a little bit more detailed. And here we have 10 level 4 ecoregions in SLELO. And that just shows that there's a lot of biodiversity in SLELO. And there's only one other prism that has more than 10 level 4 ecoregions. That's the Lower Hudson prism. So SLELO's a special place as far as ecoregions go. You have the lowlands with the Ontario lowlands, St. Lawrence lowlands, and the Mohawk Valley. Then a little higher in elevation, you have the Upper St. Lawrence Valley, and down below at the down in lower at the base of Oneida County, you have Finger Lakes, uplands, and gorges, and the glaciated Low Allegheny Plateau. Again, just coming into Oneida County there. You can see that the Lower Allegheny Plateau sort of encompasses, there's a couple of state forests there. There's Mount Hunger and can't remember the other one. It's Woodford State Forest, mainly in that ecoregion. And then the area sort of west of Oriskany Falls is in the uplands and gorges, Finger Lakes ecoregion. And then you have these ones from the Adirondacks coming into the eastern part of the prism, northern and western Adirondack foothills, and the acid-sensitive Adirondacks. Just get into the eastern part there. And then the Tug Hill transition and Tug Hill Plateau in the middle. And again, that's those ecoregions are wholly within the SLELO prism. Okay, looking down another level from ecoregions, we can see the ecological communities, which we have delineated within the prism. There are 56 rare and exemplary ecological communities that we have mapped in the prism. So that's a lot. And you can see they extend all the way up from the tip, the northern tip there along the St. Lawrence River, down to the lowest part of Oneida County. That's 9 Mile Swamp down there. And some fairly large ecological communities in some parts, like the central Tug Hill, the Pitcairn Forest up there in the northeast, and the dunes along the lake. And there are 89 existing rare plant species. This doesn't include historical occurrences. These are ones that exist, that we know exist now in the prism. That's a lot of rare species, and again, they're distributed across the prism from north to south, east to west. So just shows you that there are a lot of really diverse habitats which support a lot of different rare species throughout the prism. Okay, let's take a closer look at some of these ecological communities. So we'll start with some of the rarer ecological communities, and then we'll go to some exemplary communities of more common communities. So here we have the Alvar communities, northwest of Watertown. You can see I circled them, and they're outlined in red. And then southwest of Watertown, you have some down at Stony Point. Now, Alvar communities are really special. They are made up of mainly 5 different ecological communities, and from dry grassland to wet grassland to pavement grassland, where you have more open limestone, to Alvar shrubland and woodlands. You see in the background there's some woodlands and shrublands. This is at Chameau Barrens, and this is actually wet Alvar grassland. And these occur over limestone, flat limestone with very shallow soils and flooding in the spring and drought in the summer. So a very harsh environment. But you see by the ranks here that all of these are globally rare. G2, that's really rare for these grasslands. They also occur in Europe, in Sweden, Estonia, England, and Ireland, but very rare globally. So these are very important, also state rare. And here are some of the amazing wildflowers and rare species that occur within the alvars. There are 14 rare species that occur in the alvars, and that's the highest amount of rare species in any of the communities in SLELO. So here's just a sampling. These are 4 of the 14. American dragonhead is an S1. This is very rare. It's in the mint family. Golden corydalus on the upper right. It's these beautiful yellow flowers. And down on the lower left is Great Plains lady's tresses, which there's only 2 spots in the whole state where you can see this, and one of them is in the alvars. That's more common to the west of New York. And then on the right is mountain death camas, which is an S2. Beautiful flowers of a plant in the bunch flower family. Now here's a map of the community, how it's mapped at Chameau Barrens. And the vertical green stripes show where the alvar is. And I also overlaid the IMAP invasives spots where there are invasives mapped on the community. And there's just a few right in the middle there, which have been mapped so far. So mostly, as far as I know right now, Chameau Barrens is pretty free of invasive species, and it's a place to keep it that way. Now, if we go down to the Stony Point alvars, you see we have more problem with black and pale swallowwort in those areas. So not quite as pristine as Chameau Barrens. Okay, the second rare community I'd like to talk about are the Great Lakes dunes. These are ranked as G3, G4, and S1, S2. So a double rank means that we're not quite sure whether it's an S1 or an S2 or a G3 or a G4, but these are rare globally rare and state rare, extending from Black Pond in the north all the way down to Deer Creek Marsh in the south. Here's a photograph of the dunes at Southwick Beach. You see the open beach there, and then the dune covered with beach grass and some trees in the background there. And you have 4 dunes, you have back dunes, sort of different, a little bit different microclimates and habitats depending on how far away from the water they are. Now, New York is the only state that has dunes and on the Great Lakes and on the Atlantic Ocean. And they're both covered in beach grasses. The dunes aren't quite as high here as they are on the Atlantic coast, but still very interesting. And with different associations, some places like this is dominated by beach grass. Other associations on the dunes have more woody species, shrubs and trees like these cottonwoods. Where in the cottonwood area, you might see something like rough avens in the upper left here, Geum virginianum, and S2. In the upper right, you have Houghton's sedge, which occurs only in sands around the state, and you can find it here in the dunes. On the lower left and right are plants that you can only see in the Great Lakes dunes. This is Great Lakes sand cherry on the left, Prunus pumila, variety pumila, and S1, very rare in New York, only seen on those dunes, and also sand dune willow, Salix cordata, and S2. You can only see that on the dunes in New York. If we look at invasives on some of those areas, up at Black Pond, we see black swallowwort close by, but not really on the dunes. So I'm not sure if anybody's ever seen swallowwort on the dunes, but we don't see any invasives actually right on the dunes. So that's good. And then at Lakeview in the south, there is Frangula alnus, or the glossy buckthorn in the wetlands there on the shoreline, but might get a little bit into the dunes, but not very much. So that's good too. Now, I'll talk about one more rare community in SLELO that you may never have heard of. These are the Boreal Heath barrens, and these are mainly the Adirondacks, but do get into the Adirondack part of SLELO. This is a G3, globally rare and state rare natural community, Boreal Heath barren, and you can see there's two areas of them, north and south of Lowville. And this is what they look like. They're on sandy outwash soils, pretty sterile, and dominated by blueberry species and some rice grasses too. So not very many trees except on the edges of the heath barrens, species like black spruce and tamarack you see in the background there. Just pretty interesting areas. Not any rare species that we know about right now. Here's a close-up of the Effley Falls sand plain. There's the yellow boundary of SLELO there to the right. And along the road there, just to the south, is a couple of Japanese knotweed have been mapped. So got to keep an eye on those. So this is along just west of the Oswegatchie River. Now I'd like to talk about some of the communities that are not rare globally or rare in the state, but are exemplary. And these are usually large communities or ones that have high quality. And in SLELO, we have a lot of deep emergent marshes and shallow emergent marshes, as you know. And there are a lot of high quality marshes in SLELO. And this is one of them. This is at the mouth of the Salmon River. And you can see that they're mapped in with the green horizontal lines there. But there is some Japanese knotweed making its way into the marshes, and of course purple loosestrife too, but I think the Japanese knotweed is probably more concerning. There is one rare species that occurs here. This is slender bulrush, Shinoplectus heteroketus, which is right along the edge there of the marshes in the Salmon River mouth. This also occurs along Lake Champlain, in the lowlands of Lake Champlain. And then let's go to the Tug Hill, the central Tug Hill Plateau, where we have large communities in the central Tug Hill. You can see the red and green striping there, and the yellow dots of rare species. And I'd like to zoom in here a little bit and show you all of the rare and exemplary natural communities in the central Tug Hill. We have the ones in bold on the left are rare S3s, rare communities, confined river, black spruce, tamarack bog, spruce fir swamps. And then the exemplary examples of more common communities, a lot of headwater streams, marsh headwater streams through the marshes there, rocky headwater streams, which are more confined and steeper, shallow emergent marsh, as I mentioned before, and then the large beech maple mesic forest that's been mapped in the central Tug Hill. Really one of the best examples in the state of this community. And then on the lower left there, in green are 6 rare species, rare plants that also occur where those yellow dots are. So the Tug Hill is just a great place to go. And because of the nice, beautiful, intact forests there and some of the rare species. So here's a look at the beech maple music forest. It's a G4S4 common, but exemplary and dominated by beech, sugar maple. Sometimes there's some red maple in there. This beautiful understory of, a lot of times the understory are saplings of beech and maple. And then a good herbaceous layer too. And here's a sampling of some of the rare species that you'll find up there, mostly in the wetlands. And on the left is broad-tipped tway blade, one of the orchids. Here, you can only see this in 2 places in the state, and one of them is in the Tug Hill. Up in the center is Polemonium van Bruntii Jacob's ladder. This is a G3. This is globally rare, but it's also an S3. So we have the most populations in the whole world of Jacob's ladder. And this is in the primrose family. And in the Catskills and the Tug Hill are the main populations of Jacob's ladder. And so those populations together are the most Jacob's ladder in the whole world. It's great to know. And wild sweet Williams, Phlox maculata, another beautiful wildflower in wetlands there. And then below an aquatic small burr reed, we have a number of Sparganium species in the state, but this is the smallest one, Sparganium natans, which is an S2. So beautiful, diverse wildflowers here in the Tug Hill. So I think I'll end it there, and hopefully you can get out next growing season and see some of these communities and wildflowers. Here's a ending with a picture of Salmon River Falls. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Steve. Okay, so we've got some people giving some comments and things in the chat box here, but do feel free to unmute yourselves if you would like to engage in some open dialogue here with our presenters, Rob and Steve, or if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them or engage now. Well, if nobody else is going to step up to the plate, I was trying to take notes as you were talking, Steve, but you mentioned, what was it? I think you called it Jacob's ladder.
Mm-hmm.
Did you say, you said something about it being the largest population in the world? Did you mean in the Tug Hill region only, or in New York State? I missed exactly what you were describing.
No, the combination of the Catskill populations and the Tug Hill populations are the most in the world. Yep.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm so excited to get out there and go hiking, and especially in the spring when all the flowers start to come up, and see if I can recognize some of the species that you were pointing out during your presentation.
Yeah, that would be great.
So Steve, I have a question. I know you had a map up at one point where you looked at the rare species in the SLELO region. You had all the yellow points all over the map, I believe. And I'm wondering if that has been done for the whole state, and if so, can you look at the whole state and make any, say anything about the distribution of rare species on a statewide scale? I mean, is there any part of the state that is just flooded with, rare plants? Are there any part of the state that has very few?
Yeah, I would say that you can look at that. There's a if you go to our website and look for what's called the Environmental Resource Mapper, you can look at the distribution of communities and rare species around the state. So all those boundaries of communities that I showed, you can look at those on the community, on the resources mapper. The rare species dots are not, they're sort of obscure, they're fudged, so you can't see exactly where they are. But yeah, the Long Island has the most rare species in the state. There's just a ton of rare species because it's a coastal plain ecoregion. So it's very different from the rest of the state. And there's a lot of different habitats there. So, and a lot of development. So there's a lot of threats and and things like that. So there's a lot of rare species on Long Island. That has the most. And then probably the least, I would say, maybe the Adirondacks, although there are places like the High Peaks with a lot of rare species, but around the rest of the Adirondacks, because the soils and the geology are pretty acidic, that it just doesn't support that much. But there's still a lot of rare species there. And so if you look at the whole statewide distribution, yeah, there's a lot around the whole state. But there are some big gaps. The lower part of the Catskills, Sullivan County, is there seems to be devoid of rare species, and I think there needs to be a lot more work there, and in some places in the southern tier also. There's some counties which just haven't been explored very much for plants.
Great, thanks, Steve.
Mm-hmm.
In the chat, there's some talk about swallowwort, and throughout the presentation, on the maps that Steve was showed, you know, swallowwort nearby some of these rare communities. And Rob, would you mind maybe talking a little bit more about the Hypena opulenta program that SLELO was involved in? Because there's some interest in learning a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. That's, you know, that's a whole another presentation in and of itself. But, you know, briefly, I would just say that, you know, the past couple of years of biological control for swallowwort has been tested and approved. I should say just approved for release in New York State. It's called Hypena opulenta, and it's native to the Ukraine and the surrounding region, which is the same native range for swallowwort. And so we've done some release cages here in Eastern Lake Ontario. We've had 4 cages in 4 areas put out in swallowwort populations, and the results, you know, we've had varying degrees of success, but the results in some of those cages are quite impressive. So the moth is a defoliator. It lays its eggs, the adults lay their eggs, and then the various instars, various stages of larval development feed on the leaves of the swallowwort plant. And once a stem gets about 50% loss of foliage, then the stem dies. And so we had a couple cages where, you know, it was full of swallowwort, and within 4 weeks there was no swallowwort. And then we removed the cages and liberated the insect into the environment. So there's potential for that to help us with suppressing swallowwort populations. And the nice thing is that moth feeds only on swallowwort. So when the swallowwort dies, you know, if there's no more swallowwort for the insect to eat, then the insect will die off as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Rob. And you can learn more about the Hypena releases that SLELO was involved in on our website as well. Are there any other questions or comments that anybody would like to discuss? Okay, well, thanks for joining us today to learn about what we're protecting. If you feel inspired to protect our lands and waters, please do join our invasive species volunteer surveillance network to learn to recognize and report invasive plants and animals and aid early detection efforts. And on Thursday, December 3rd at 1, join us to learn how you can protect hemlock trees by taking a hike. Hemlock woolly adelgid, an invasive forest pest, is killing our hemlock trees, and we're promoting a virtual hike challenge that showcases trails in the SLELO region that have hemlocks growing near the path. And this webinar is aimed to recruit and train volunteers to monitor these trails for this invasive forest pest. And do be sure to check your inbox for a follow-up email with resources from today's discussion and links to the webinar I mentioned and a volunteer for nature opportunity. And the recording will also be in that follow-up email along with PDF of the slides. So everything will be sent to you via email in the upcoming days. Thank you for joining us today, and that concludes our webinar.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Rob.
Thanks very much.
Have a wonderful day.